Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Mendocha, Dr. Speed Selling for It's a Paul World. It's a Paul World, and we're talking to, we're going all the way across the oceans. We're going to Central Europe. We're going to be talking to the one, the only Barbara Kolm. And Barbara, welcome to It's a Paul World. And we're going to be talking about FreedomFest 2021. And we're going to navigate these kind of interesting waters. So welcome.
Thank you very much, John Paul. Looking forward to our conversation and, of course, seeing you at FreedomFest live again, as always in the past.
Well, and Barbara, just before we got started, you shared. I mean, I'm a veteran since 2013, but it seems like you predate me. I mean, obviously, you started as a child there. So how how many have you been to approximately?
I think every single Freedom Fest, but the first one. So,
Ah,
yep.
well,
Uh,
for those who don't know you, because I mean, I know you're well known in certain circles. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we can go from there.
well, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I run the Austrian Economic Center, which is the Austrian center in Europe, where we, of course, defend and preach free markets, libertarianism, freedom for individuals and enterprises, but all, of course, backed at the Austrian school. This year, as a matter of fact, we celebrate the 150th anniversary of Karl Menger's famous book, where he kind of changed economics, or the thought of how we think about economics, his principles of economics. By the way, we did a film. We just did a film on that. We have a couple of publications coming up, of course, to celebrate the 150th birthday. And he was the father of the Austrian School of Economics. Mises once said, until Karl Menger, there was no such thing as the Austrian School. It was just Karl Menger. And then out of that came this famous notion of great economists. I mean, you all know Hayek. You might have heard of Schumpeter. You might have heard of others. But those disciples are just great examples, shining examples. We have gone through several crises in the past, and it's boom and bust cycles. And this is what the Austrian school, what actually Hayek and Mises described already in the 1920s. And they predicted several crashes already back then. So I'm the head of the Austrian Center. I founded it. And we have also one other great product, which I definitely have to promote right now, which is the Free Market Roadshow. You might have heard of that. In 2008, we started in 4 European capitals just to spread the Austrian ideas out of Austria. And then a year later, we were in 7 capitals. Up to now, we do 40 countries in Europe, which is 40 capitals plus additional cities, where we provide libertarian solutions to today's problems. And unfortunately, due to this COVID crisis and the travel bans, we had to do it online this year. But next year, we will be traveling with more than 400 speakers throughout the continent, talking to thousands of individuals about those libertarian solutions. So this is one hat. The other hat that I wear is the president of the Hayek Institute, of course, also based in Vienna. And then I have a couple of other jobs that I have in enterprises and on boards of several institutions. That's about it. But, Austrian economics, entrepreneurship keeps me busy.
I was going to say, what are you doing with your spare time? But it doesn't seem like you have left a lot of room for spare time. So,
Well,
but you love what you do. It sounds like you're very impassioned about it.
like you, I mean, once you believe in those ideas, you just have to do it. You have to do that 24/7.
Well, excellent. And you're going to be at Freedom Fest. And so what are some of the things you're going to talk about at Freedom Fest? And give us a little bit of a glimpse of this. I mean, just give us a glimpse.
Yeah. Well, the usual fun panel is the global outlook, the global economic outlook, with great speakers across the world, where we just analyze facts and figures. I mean, I personally, as an economist and as an Austrian economist, I don't think that we can predict the future. This would be, to put it in Hayek's words, really not just. You can't do that. It's a pretense of knowledge, and which we don't. We should not do that. And of course, there is no such thing as full information. So what we do, we analyze facts, numbers, and therefore you may look at certain models and can see, okay, we can go this direction or the other. But given the panel, the other panelists, it's always great fun and a lot of interest. And I personally, I have the privilege to debate Europe and present the situation that we have these days.
Well, and the interesting thing is this is the first time that it is not being held in Las Vegas. And since I gambled professionally for 4 years, what I always say to somebody is if I could actually predict the future, I know exactly what I would do, which is I'd be at the high stakes craps table in Caesar's Palace because I like Caesars, and would be able to predict the next roll, which of course is not possible because, well, I'm talking to Barbara because I can't predict the next roll. So I like that. I like that you start off by saying that really no one can know or predict the future, but what we can do is get a glimpse or get an insight about where things are at and look at policies that will either strengthen or weaken those types of things. So since we've gone through this pandemic, what's your kind of sense about where we stand just in general in Europe itself? Because I know that you're the first person from Europe that I've talked to on this journey of interviewing a bunch of speakers. So you have a different perspective. So are things opening up? Are we seeing a snapback? What do you see?
Well, you have to look at two sides. One is the health side, the health issue. The other side is the economic issue. And in order to avoid a bad health situation, some people locked down the continent, which happened, I think, in the US as well. But I think the consequences in Europe were pretty harsh. However, we are recovering. This is a good note. This is a good news. And but why are we recovering? Because we put a lot of money into the system, and I think that's the wrong reason for recovery. We as Austrian economists know that we can only grow with productivity and with creation of wealth. And what we do right now is subsidies, support, unemployment, etc., etc. I don't think that this is the right solution. However, as I mentioned, the good news is we are slowly getting back on track again. The numbers are rising. I mean, Europe in general had minus 6%, 7% growth in average last year, minus. And then we were recovering overall. And now we're recovering at a very slow pace, but we are back to the positive numbers. And private consumption is picking up again, which is very positive for employment. And of course, we will have to look into our productivity numbers. This is an issue across Europe because, once you allow people to work from home and not to work at all for a long time, very long time, then productivity goes back or is reduced. And that's something where we have to ask is this reasonable? And that's again where we as economists come back, look at reason.
Well, and so in some ways, when you say that it's going to go through recovery, one of the senses that I have is that the world is going to come out of this differently than it went into it. We're not going to see the world get back to what everyone believes is going to be normal. We're going to go to a new and different phase. Would you agree with that?
Apologies.
That's somebody who needs her information so bad. They said we've got to get a hold of her right now. Get Barbara on the phone. It doesn't matter. And there you go. So.
Apologies, sorry for that. But you're totally right. We will change. We will change, and we will see a lot of changes. I mean, digitalization is picking up. at least in Europe, in our Western worlds, we learn a lot. We've learned how to communicate in a different way. But to be honest, I prefer person to person. And I'm glad that we are back at Freedom Fest finally, and that we can meet and greet and discuss life with our peers, and have disputes with those who don't share our ideas. I think this is wonderful. So this is one thing. Then if you look at certain industries that have changed totally, whether it's the tourism industry, travel industry, they have undergone huge changes, dramatic changes. They will have to be very creative to get people back on planes. We see a lot of technological advantages now that are being pushed, whether it's the so-called green technologies in Europe, where Brussels is pushing hard for example, supporting train and giving preferences to this type of mobility rather to planes. But there is also other forms that we see, hydrogen in terms of power. What kind of power are we using to produce electricity? And all those things are have changed our mindsets.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if any of these new forms can survive without massive government intervention. I mean, when you start subsidizing something and hit a tipping point in my mind, I mean, I have we don't, first off, I would need a different school of Austrian to handle the psychological damage, but I owned a hydrogen car, one of the very few ones that were sold in California. And it was a nightmare beyond belief. But all I can say is that it is a long way for mass adoption. And it is going to be very difficult in my mind without massive subsidies. And the problem with subsidies is that they never really seem to develop the best innovation, because they create distortions. I don't know if you agree with that. Those kind of disincentives, incentives create really very large distortions.
Just look at the example of the solar industry in Germany. When Merkel made the decision, we have to change the use of electricity, or which kind of electricity we use for our industries. They all of a sudden decided, let's subsidize wind and solar. And all those companies that were focusing on solar were heavily subsidized, and even until now. And now they find out that their competitor in China produces those solar panels for a price that is, even if you include shipping and everything, they outperform the German manufacturers. So come on, what is the outcome of that? I mean, this is definitely not how markets should work, and how markets definitely work. So subsidizing a whole industry that is not competitive anymore doesn't make any sense, because you have to look who pays the price for that. I mean, it's the taxpayers, it's us who pay for it.
Well, and eventually consumers vote with their feet. They decide what they are or are not going to buy. I just think back in my career in high tech, and the Japanese government decided that they were behind, and what they needed was some good old central planning. And they decided to band together a bunch of people in industry, all the major manufacturers, and they invented their own operating system. I mean, you have to be a not only a historian but a trivia expert to find out what this was, and it was an utter and total disaster. In the meantime, Microsoft, without government subsidies, ends up dominating the world on it and making Bill Gates at the time one of the richest men ever. So to me, it's perverse when you start tweaking the markets in such a way under some other cause, and that's a little nebulous of what that cause is. So, all right, fascinating. Well, switching topics just a little bit. So talk about your journey to Freedom Fest this year. I know that you're going to have to, and by the way, if you sneak across the border, I'll just say, well, she's a distant cousin. My grandfather was German, so we can kind of stretch it a little bit. But talk a little bit about the journey you're going to make, and it's important for what we're going to talk about in just a second. So, what does that journey look like for you from, Central European?
Well, for us, it's a little bit difficult, but we will have we will get permissions to entry. I know of some friends, for example, our Spanish friends who travel to Panama, go in quarantine for 2 weeks, or to Mexico, and then enter the country. For us, it's different, but it's still it's not a pleasant thing. And last year we were unable to travel at all. And Mark's famous finance summit, I was sitting here in Austria and presenting via Zoom, and I would have loved to join that, because it's talking with friends on financial issues, and what will happen to gold, what will happen to our currencies, what will happen to commodities, how will cryptocurrencies change our world. I mean, all those things we missed last year. And I'm really looking forward to being back and being able to discuss that live with you.
Well, excellent. So that brings me to a very important thing, which is talk to me a little bit about why going to FreedomFest is so important. And for those of you who have been watching this series of interviews I've been doing, Barbara is one of the few people I can't give her directions to FreedomFest, because for all of you who are in the US, it's very simple. I'm going to give you the directions right now. You don't need Google Maps. If you didn't learn the interstate highway system in the 4th grade, then go back and get a refund on your education. But if you know it, you find Interstate 90. You determine, are you either east or west of Rapid City, South Dakota? And if you are, then you know which direction you need to go, because you will not miss Rapid City, because it is a wide spot in the road in Interstate 90. For all due respect to people in Rapid City, and I actually have somebody who works for me who's there, but it is hard to miss it, because that's how I'm going to go find it. Now, having said that, so Barbara, why should somebody come to FreedomFest? What's the whole, because you've been doing this for years. So what is that reason?
Well, I think it's the best mix of people who love liberalism in the classic way, free markets, who believe in individual and entrepreneurial freedom, who have different backgrounds, whether it's academic background, whether it's entrepreneurial background, whether it's employed people, self-employed, it's students, it's all kinds, it's senior citizens. It's really a great mix of individuals who love the discussion and the dispute that we have there, and the topics are so widely spread. But it always comes to this, to the least, the smallest denominator is freedom, and everybody who cares about freedom should just go there, and should join and meet and see the great speakers that are there, and the great reporters, the great journalists, the great presenters, and it's fun to be with this crowd. And it's well organized, by the way.
Oh, it is well organized. I mean, Mark and Joanne, they have it's seemingly it's such a great staff, and it's a really well run event. And so I can tell you this: Barbara is going to have multiple speaking sessions. She's going to be on several panels. Here's the other part that I think is so amazing about FreedomFest. I've been to lots of different conferences. I've spoken at conferences. Is that the speakers, the presenters are also available. So if you see Barbara, you've seen this interview, walk up to her and say hello, talk to her about some things, and you'll get to meet somebody from Austria. If you've never met anybody from Austria, there you go. You had to go to South Dakota to do it, but you've accomplished that. Check that off your bucket list if you need to. The other thing is I think that the most important thing about FreedomFest is that because of this wide variety of ideas, and for what Mark Skousen has done to put this together, he really does live the ideal, because it is wide open, and he lets people be who they are. And there aren't it doesn't feel like there's any heavy hand. There's the invisible hand, of course, but there's no heavy hand limiting what people are going to say. And you may be upset by what some people are going to say. You may be enthralled by it. You may be enlightened by it. but what I can tell you is you're going to learn from it. So hopefully you're going to come to Freedom Fest 21, January 21st to 24th in Rapid City, South Dakota. Now, before we let Barbara, who's been very gracious, go, I have just a couple of quick questions, and then she can tell us, one last gem that she may have. One is, I'm interested from an Austrian economist point of view of the rise of cryptocurrency and where you see that going in the next period of time. Not a prediction, but what do you believe is really happening with crypto?
Well, the interesting thing is that it is disruptive, and that it's always one step ahead of the regulation that we see these days and that is coming. And then you have to, of course, understand that there is that there are central banks who want crypto currencies, which is one, but it's just a digital system that they map out for their currencies. This is something different. So you mustn't misunderstand that if we all of a sudden have a digital Swedish krona or a digital, say, dollar, I mean, this is not crypto. But the other thing is the true cryptocurrencies that are pushing innovation ahead. And also with regards to regulation, we have to look how fast they adapt and how fast they move through all this bureaucracy, or actually are ahead of bureaucracy. So this challenge, I love that from the innovative perspective of the Austrian school. So this is great. And plus we see a couple of countries who are already experimenting with cryptos. Switzerland, for example, was the first country a couple of years ago that used Bitcoin, even to pay your own taxes in a special canton. Now we see several countries that use Bitcoin for various reasons. I mean, not that I agree with all the reasons why a country might adopt it, but at least it's a challenge, and that's something positive.
And the other question is so 150 years ago, roughly, the Austrian economic school gets birthed or rises from whatever ashes there were. How relevant is that in today's world? And could you kind of describe for somebody why there is relevancy in the Austrian school?
Well, what Menger described back then is more relevant than ever. He was looking at various things that have never been portrayed in that way, not even by Adam Smith. Who was only looking at the benefit, the butcher and the person who goes to the butcher and they exchange there. But what Menger described is its subjective value that an individual has in doing something, in exchanging, in producing a good, or in selling a good or buying a good. And this subjective value theory is very important to us. And this is what makes the individual choose and make his decisions. And this is very important. This is the first time 150 years ago when this was described in such a way. And then of course he also adds other parameters like time, that is important. Always, when do you exchange? Under which circumstances? What does your environment look like? And then he also makes the very important reference to money. What kinds of money we use, the value of money, whether it's underpinned or not, which standard it has. And a little bit later, at the end of the 19th century, the Austrian Empire underwent from the situation to use silver standard to gold standard. And he was in the committee of this discussion, and he advised to take it slowly, to move carefully, and not to outmaneuver the individuals by not sharing the information, etc. So he was a very wise man, and this is still relevant. All these things are still relevant in today's economics. And besides his followers, Hayek, Mises, Böhm-Bawerk, and many others, those were those people who shaped the dispute in the last century. And nowadays we have the advancement of the Austrian school with public choice, etc. And I think this is a lot of things that we can learn from the Austrians.
Well, any last words before we give a quick wrap up? What are some of the things that we haven't covered, or something that you think you just have to say?
Well, come and visit me at FreedomFest. Let's talk to the Austrian, the real Austrian. If you don't see me at FreedomFest, come over to Europe, visit us in Vienna. We have a great conference coming up. By the way, Mark will also be speaking there, 3rd and 4th of November in Vienna on the Austrian school. Great audience, great academics, great speakers, lots of fun, elegant, with a huge gala in a palace. If that doesn't convince you, then join us next year for our Free Market Roadshow, and always stay in touch and join our network of like-minded individuals, whether it's in the US with Mark or whether it's with us in Europe. But with It's a Paul's World, you actually you link us. So thank you, John Paul, for doing that.
Oh, absolutely. And so what is the website? Somebody wants to jump on your website. What is your website?
The website is www.austriancenter.com. Very simple, austriancenter.com. And the other one is www.freemarket-rs.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, I just want to thank Barbara Kolm, who has come on and talked about the Austrian school, something that I know some of you out there may be interested. Maybe you've known a little bit about it, and she is the real deal. I look forward to meeting her face-to-face in Rapid City at FreedomFest 2021. More importantly is that if you are interested in finding truly what should be done as we move forward through these very interesting times, could be dangerous times, could be treacherous times, but there is always one thing to know, that politicians do not know what Barbara has just shared with you. And if you learned this and you know this, that way when you meet someone, you will not be stopped or stymied, because you'll have some answers that will hopefully at least make them think and possibly have them change. So it has been my great privilege to have Barbara come on and spend some time with us. And thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.